Welcome back to ZMS Esports Studio, your home for all things virtual cycling and virtual racing. So that time of year has come, that time of year that all cycling fans and sports fans around the world alike mark their calendars for. That's right, the Tour de France. And what are we at ZMS Studios, Esports Studios, doing to celebrate this wondrous global event? Well, we have put together Chase the Yellow, which, much like the original Tour de France, is 9 stages of racing fun. And what are those 9 stages? Well, on Tuesday, just gone this week, we had stage 1, Avranches to Mont Saint-Michel. Today, for stage 2, we have Château-Redon to Sisteron. And on Saturday of this week, we're going to have stage 3, Alpe d'Huez. So that's going to be the big, powerful stinger of a climb. And then we have stage 4, Sustance. We have stage 5, Albertville to Charlot. Then we have stage 6, Mount Ventoux. Stage 7, Ceylon. Stage 8, Mount Vernier. Not the most powerful of climbs, but certainly a bit of a stinger nonetheless. And stage 9, the most iconic of stages, Versailles to Paris. But what is today's stage? Well, let's take a closer look at that. For stage 2, as we covered, we are going Château-Redon to Sisteron, and you can see those beautiful images of the very rustic rural route that we are taking on today. And I'm sure the Tour de France does wonders for rural French tourism. But our course today is 40.8 kilometers cumulative distance and cumulative elevation gain of 244 meters. So again, not the biggest of climbs, but enough to leave a little bit of a sting. So we've taken a look at the courses and we've taken a look at today's stage. But who are the contenders who are going to be taking on these very ferocious races? Well, you can see our list of teams there, but let's take a closer look, beginning with OTR Punchers. And there are our contenders for OTR Punchers. OTR Spartans. Moon Riders. E-Cycle Club Denmark Team 1. E-Cycle Club Denmark Team 2. And here we have a union between West London Virtual Racing and Pedalers. A familiar name to riders on other virtual cycling platforms too is Glasgow United Cycling Club. Race 3R. A team that made a very big impression on stage 1, which we'll cover in a second, Razio Racing. And here we jump into the RGT Australia contingent, beginning with the Bike Place. And continuing with Skippy Anderson. And of course, we cannot forget Cadell's Sharks. And Spratty's Koalas. Stewie's Magpies. Rocket Robbie. And last but not least, we have Oppie's Stars. So now that you've taken a look at our courses, today's stage, and the all-important contenders taking on the stage, why don't we jump on over to take a look at the general classification results from stage 1, beginning with men's general classification. And we saw a very impressive battle there between Igor Kopse and Kasper Hederdam. I'm somewhat familiar with the career of Igor Kopse. He is a UCI champion in, I believe, the Grand Fondo, or as the British and Australians and the French might say, the Sportive world. And Kasper Hederdam made a very impressive stamp for ECKD, both coming in at 46 minutes and 13 seconds. If you remember seeing that, it was a nail biter. There was barely half a bike length in it. Jonathan Orr was incredibly impressive, and unfortunately ended up falling into the, how would the French pronounce that, the chasse patate, the potato chase position with 46 minutes and 20 seconds. Then we had Said Karadine also for race 3R. We saw some team tactics between Jonathan and Said. That was 47 minutes and 33 seconds. Barely 2 seconds behind for Razio Racing. Really making sure that Razio in that top 5 was Mark Rowbottom with 47.35. But what about the women's GC? Well, it's all of the Australia contingent, it appears. So Caroline Ruta for Spratty's Koalas, and it's Spratty's Koalas all the way down for the top 5. 55 minutes and 21 for Caroline. Williams Michelle had 56 minutes 39. It's a little bit of a gap there between. Kat Coleman getting 56.57. Melissa Fanning with 56.57 also. And 1 hour and barely 38 seconds in it. So just sub of 1 hour, 1 minute is Wendy Gallagher, otherwise known as Wendy Wonder Wheels. And let's take a look at how the teams stand. So, of course, that very impressive Rollier all-rounder effort from Igor really shot Razio Racing up to the top spot. But let's not forget Mark Rowbottom's effort to get into the top 5 too. So, standing at a cumulative team time of 2 hours, 21 and 58 minutes. Race 3R, just barely that shade behind. Fantastic effort there from Jonathan Orr and Said, who really pushed Race 3R up there in that second place position with 2 hours, 22 and 30 seconds. So not much in it there. Moon Riders, 2 hours, 24 and 15. Cadell Sharks really making a very great first impression. 2 hours, 24 with 32 seconds. And E-Cycle Club Denmark Team 1. I mean, what an impressive effort we saw there on that front breakaway between Igor, between Kasper and Jonathan. But Kasper really made that very big, very impressive first stamp, if you will, for ECKD with 2 hours, 25 minutes and 3 seconds. So with that said, let's spend a little while getting familiarized with our riders on that all-important start line. As we jump on over to the start line, drop in the comments if you're watching, who is your rider in this race league in Chase the Yellow, but also who's your guy in the Tour de France? For me personally, I'm Canadian. I've got to go with the Canadians in the Israel team. The Israel, is that still called Israel Startup Nation, or has that changed now? I'm going to Michael Woods. I know he's not the favorite because he's a little bit older, and cycling is, of course, one of those sports where it's the 20-somethings game, and he is, I believe, 38. So a little bit getting towards being aged out, maybe, which I hate to say, but he is a phenomenal rider who, for those first 2 stages, came in 5th in the first stage, 6th in the second. I was hoping yesterday with stage 5 that we would see him really be able to punch up those climbs, because he is the Grand Pure, if you will, the climber for that team. Unfortunately, we didn't see that, but it all comes down to tactics in the end. and how you place yourself in that peloton, and certainly in the lead outs and breakaways. And sadly, it wasn't Michael's day. I'm quite shocked actually that we haven't seen Wout van Aert yet make a really big stamp on the top place pole position, but I'm sure it's gonna come. Also, Fabio Jakobsen. I'm so sad to see another crash. I'm pretty sure he's got some crash anxiety from that crash a few years back now, but I'm sure he's going to spring back as well. So we're here on the start line. What we are seeing on screen, I'll just run through this with you. In the center, we have two windows. We have live, which is the Northern Hemisphere contingent of the race, or majority of the world, if you want to view it that way. And then to the right, we have time slot 1. That is a previous time slot that went earlier to be a more accessible time for the Australia contingent. And while we say most of the world for Northern Hemisphere, there is a huge Wahoo RGT rider contingent down in Australia. Currently they're winter, so they will be looking more at riding indoors, which helps numbers greatly. Top center of the screen, we have our cumulative distance remaining, so that will tick down. We're not climbing up to the finish number, we're counting down to it. So on the left, of course, much like your windows beneath, we have the live or Northern Hemisphere. To the right, we have TS1, short for time slot 1. 40.8 kilometers today, almost 41 kilometers. And we have that cumulative elevation gain of 244 meters. Relative flat, but a pretty bitter stinger right on the start here. Certainly going to separate the climbers and the rollers from the sprinters. But are we going to see team tactics come more into the fore today? Are we going to see the domestiques, if you will, who are going to perhaps do some drafting for their key sprinters, their key rollers? Maybe. Let's find out. Or are we going to see a all for one, one for all, where riders are going to push forward? Certainly we saw Razio begin to do a bit of a team tactic there, and then just let Igor Kopse fly very shortly into the race. And wow, he does not stop. But what do we expect from a Slovenian rider? I mean, talk about a mountain nation in Europe that has provided phenomenal talent like no other, based on per capita only. You can only really talk about Slovenia. And here we go, we're right off the front. And we have M. Senon pushing right on the front here. But we have Casper coming right to the front again for the North America ride. Mark Rowbottom, who must have found the time for today difficult to attend, has joined the Australia contingent in time slot 1. And he is right off the front there. We know that Razio is going to show us some impressive racing, impressive riding, whatever happens here today. And it's very impressive to see Mark Rowbottom right at the front there. Maybe dropping back a little bit now as we see Bilo. I'm surprised that we're not seeing Bo Duke at the front just yet. Kind of in the back there, we hasn't formed into a breakaway yet. We have an entire lead-out peloton, which is great to see. So I'm sure Bo Duke is going to show us something fierce. He's already climbed up to 7th place. Certainly one of my ones to watch as we get deeper into this Chase the Yellow series. Something you will notice that I will touch upon here is, of course, the stages that we have set are, of course, going to be shorter than the actual Tour de France stages, and that's so that we can invite racers from all different abilities and fitness levels to have their chance to compete. And we've had wonderful sign-ups, 17 teams and well over 100. I struggle to memorize the number, but well over 100 races between both Australia and Northern Hemisphere. So here we see the climb, and yes, just as I always suspect going into these, we're seeing our lead-out peloton begin to really string out, begin to find the stretching point of that elastic, if you will. So C. Dowell, normally a powerful climber, I'm sure we're going to see C. Dowell find his legs in this climb and really push through. And all of these are familiar names if you watch both the React E-Cycling race series and the Love Triple T Team Time Trial series right here on ZMS Esports Studio, all of which, much like today's race, take place on Wahoo RGT, which is the virtual cycling platform you are watching today. Wendy Gallagher here, or Wendy Wonderwheels, who suggested stage 1 to us, the Avranches to Mont Saint-Michel, or as we call it in England, St. Michael's Mound, because it is a tourist destination that is accessible from both countries. So this climb is really separating our rollers and climbers from the sprinters. But what's going to happen as we get back into the flats here? So look at that. Casper really pushing ahead. And Igor Kopse, right now, I think he's finding his legs. He's maybe doing what I've seen him do before, which is to really hold back his effort and then begin to tempt his fellow riders into chasing to see whose efforts he can soften. But Casper here, again, making a very known impression for the EU Cycle Club Denmark. And we have Wouter Claus out of Belgium, really pushing ahead in chase just behind there. And we've got Saad Keradine, my apologies, for Race 3R, really giving a chase to Casper. As we get out of this climb, will Sade be able to hold that rear wheel, get some draft benefit, and really begin to put in some big attacks? Time will tell. We also have Jonathan Orr, which, based on the last stage, is not a surprise to us that he's currently holding that third place position. And I believe we're seeing another rider. Oh, wow. So moving to the side may have been a tactic that has cost Casper placement there. We've got Kenneth Barkley here really pushing ahead for the OTR teams. And is it any surprise that a Scottish roadie, a Scotsman, is really being able to push through the cranks on this climb? Wonderful to see you, Christophe Contant, and thanks for watching and joining us. And I echo your sentiments entirely. I wish a good race to all. I can see that name tag of Wouter Claus. I know Wouter from other race series and previous races, and I know that he's got some fierce quads in him. And I'm sure we're going to see him put in a phenomenal effort. And we can see that name tag of Igor Kopse looming in the background behind Kenneth here. And we know that he is a rolleur. He can sprint for days, he can climb for days. He's got everything there. So that comes from, of course, not just his wins at UCI mandated and regulated race level, but also from those races largely being Fondo, Grand Fondo, or again, as Britain, France, and some of the British colonies may say, the sportive world. My apologies, Keith Barkley. I always get thrown by having the single letter initial, which is a hallmark of Wahoo RGT. So if you wish to follow along with the efforts, like say if you're into the sciences in cycling and road racing, you can follow along the efforts by looking at the color-coded bar beneath the name tag on any given rider. For example, if we look at Keith's name tag here, when you see the green that is around or maybe just very slightly beneath Keith's personal FTP or functional threshold power, that's the level that you can ride at anywhere between 20 minutes and 1 hour. It may be known as your ride all day effort, if you've heard people say that. And then as it goes into your ambers, that's going your kind of 10 to 15% above. As you get into the darker oranges, that's just sub anaerobic, and red is full anaerobic. And here we go. There is now a full chase peloton behind Keith's breakaway there. And we are seeing riders attack this downhill as much as you can. You can look at your elevation profile beneath to see that they are just about to hit a part of elevation where most riders will be spun out. And you can tell again by color coding, green being your relative flats, ambers for your oranges are your mild climbs. So Razio Racing, we've got Igor Kopse really pushing towards the front there. And it seems like Razio is really pushing the front altogether. So Mark Rowbottom is actually in time slot 1, but we've got a number of riders here that I'll touch on as we get deeper into the race. So we're seeing some team tactics come in here. Igor's really pushing ahead right now, but it looks like Jay Van Beers and a couple of the other riders here are going to be acting as domestiques for Igor, knowing that he is perhaps the star player. But have we seen all the stars from Razio yet? Time will tell as we get deeper into that. But how is our lead group getting on? So we've got a lead chase group here in time slot 1. And that's a good mix of teams again. So we're not quite seeing the same come into play with that we've just seen on the Northern Hemisphere side just yet. We see a couple of teams represented close together, split by a bit of a distance. But let's see what they can do. Mark Wardrop there, looking to chase. It looks like he's also in the chasse patate, or what would be known in English as the wild goose chase, the position between groups where you don't quite have the benefit of team tactics, you don't quite have the benefit of the draft, you're having to push at exertion, and you can't quite temper your efforts therein. So we're seeing some very fast chasing here, very fast closing of gaps. The Australia contingent is aware that they've got a time standard to beat now against the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm sure we're going to see some fierce effort come from down under. It will truly be the Thunder from down under, is what I'm hoping. Igor pushing into third place position. So what happened to Keith here? He appears to have dropped back. Igor Kopse kind of dancing around in the places there. That's bound to happen in a bunchy like that, a little peloton. Arguably an echelon. We're spread way across the road there. Jonathan Orr, look at that. Really pushing through this relative flat as it evens through to the descent. Daniel Schusch pushing ahead for Moon Riders. I know we've seen some phenomenal German sprinters in the Tour de France this week. Is Daniel Schusch going to be bringing that glory back for Deutschland? So Race Friar taking a lead position, kind of spreading out here. And it looks like they're trying to form a little bit of an echelon maybe, doing a little bit of marking to try and hold back riders that they're in contention with. But it looks like Jay Van Beers for Razio is pushing ahead. Maybe the tactic here for Razio Racing might not be so much domestique and your star players being held in the draft, but maybe it's more of pushing ahead where possible and trying your best to soften the effort in the quads and the glutes of other riders. Race Friar just on team there, so you can see Jonathan Orr, who's really pushing ahead. You can also see Said Carradine. And the moment we've been waiting for. If you're familiar with RGT Cycling Race Series, we know that Anthony Debré has got some fierce legs on him. But Wouter Claus, I knew that he was going to be pushing ahead for a second here. So arguably going to be the star sprinter for Moon Riders here. And we know that he's pretty much a roller. He's pretty much an all-rounder if you've been watching the RGT Cycling Race Series. But he does have some fierce legs for a sprint here. We can see him really pushing through this relative flat, going into a little bit of a climb. by getting out of the saddle, pushing into the hoods, and really stamping through those cranks, if you will. Really looks like a consummate professional on that bike. Well done. And we can see Carl there. I'm always thoroughly impressed, and I say this every time, by the fact that he is clearly working so hard, that he is so hot that he can only wear those boob shorts. And Gordon Jackson, also a pretty solid rollier. I'm sure we're going to see OTR make a sizable stamp on this race series as we get deeper into it. Look at that. Walter makes getting out the saddle look like both a science and an art in equal measure. So our lead out, or our breakaway here with, we just jumped away from that. So Cadell Sharks, Bo Duke. So that's the team that Bo Duke was on. I'm sure we're going to see Cadell Sharks really make a big stamp on this race as we get deeper into it. So we've got Mark Hammond there as well. And look at this, very impressive. Spreading out across the road. There's some team tactics coming into play, trying to force echelons by Race 3R, and they're doing phenomenal team tactics right now. I believe there's a little bit of a domestique and sprint effort that is slingshotting up and down the road between Sade and Jonathan. We are seeing some wonderful tactics coming out of Race 3R. Razio trying to keep their team members together here, trying not to let marking happen. And I love this sound effect of the helicopter. Really makes you feel like you're there in France. And all of our wonderful vision mixing today is provided by the very talented Damon out of London in the UK for ZMS Esports Studio. And there we can see Damon. Hey, Damon. I think that's phenomenal, by the way, the technology that allows me to be almost 6,000 kilometers away in Western Central, if you will, Canada, in Saskatchewan, in Saskatoon to be specific, and Damon in the UK. And all of you all around the world, both watching and competing right now. So we can see ECKD here in one of the rear chase groups, keeping their team together, among other riders from other teams here. Some pretty good chase efforts. Christophe Contant, who made that wonderful comment just a little bit earlier there. For France and for the West London Pedalers team. And again, some more ECKD team members. Very aware of team tactics, whatever chase group they're in. Trying to sit together to make this chase a bit easier, spread out that draft benefit. Very good camaraderie going on there for sure. And here we can see a mix of teams. And once again as well. So we've got OTR punchers here sticking pretty close together with familiar names to you. James Ogilvie, Sean Lavelle, Kevin Barkley, Tony Lake. So James Ogilvie is actually the organizer and I believe the founder of, as well as the word for this, either aggregator or statistician for the Love Triple T or the Love Team Time Trial Series. OTR Spartans, which is the team with Jonathan Bird, another very familiar name to all of us, Peter Austin, Gordon Jackson, who we saw with those glorious pain faces on web camera there, Richard Wagstaff, Robin Sanderson, and Shane Blackmore. All very powerful riders here, but it shows you the sheer power of our lead riders, that they are managing to get the edge over these very, very powerful riders. Razio Racing, who are forming perhaps the tip of the spear, if you will, alongside Race 3R in our main attack peloton, our main breakaway at the front, with Matt Hammond, Nick Greenhall, and comrades. So look at this in the time slot 1 replay. Mark Rowbottom really making a very impressive stamp on this for the Rezio Racing team. Right there in that second place position. And that is, we also have a couple of members of Cadell's Sharks right up at the front here. I'd be very surprised if that B at the back is not Bo Duke. That is Bo Duke. And I'm sure we're going to see some very powerful attacks from Bo as we get deeper into today's race. But Mark Rowbottom, well, I think he is my rider to watch for time slot 1 today. But I'm not going to hedge any bets before we see that finish line sprint. But again, if you're watching live, who are you placing your bets on today? So Mark, as we get into the relative flats, little bumps of climbs, if you will, as we even back out into that main flat that you can see for the final 2/3 of the race. Certainly beginning to stamp on it and use his seeming ability as a climber to maybe edge out a bit of a lead here. But we're seeing Jay Van Beers really push ahead for Rezio Racing, trying to move between chase groups. So, a little bit different. We saw the big, powerful efforts in the last race where we had the Northern Hemisphere race, the live race on the left of your screen, punch ahead. But if you look at the top center of your screen, you can see by a hair, by a mere 100 meters or so, that the Australia contingent are really pushing ahead. I think they were perhaps aware of that from the broadcast last time, and they are really gunning it on the front. Mark Rowbottom has certainly helped push that effort along, push the speed up, but we certainly see that being eaten away. And Igor Kopse taking the lead position again. He is at his most well-trained right now in this race series. Maybe he's trained specifically for this. And he is really gunning for it with his prowess as a rolleur. And he is perhaps using the virtual steering controls, my apologies, that are available to you baked in through Wahoo RGT to do that drifting across the road, perhaps as a tactic to dissuade other riders from trying to push beyond the line that he wants to take. And look at that glorious pain face there on Gordon Jackson, who is really pushing right now. But I'm always just impressed by how cool and collected and together Welter Claus looks. I am personally a little bit more like Gordon. I turn into a raspberry when I'm really pushing it. I turn red, and I, much like Welter though, with the headband, the sweatband there, I turn into a very aggressive head sweater. And like I said on the last one, I have such an aggressive calcium buildup on the steering column of my indoor road bike. It's unbelievable. I would have to do a lot of maintenance on it if I were to ever use it as an outdoor road bike. But I do have an all carbon for my outdoor road bike, a Canadian-made Norco CRR Performance from 2012, and that was back before they started doing that 11 to 34 when they were really focused in the early 2010s on doing those, what were they, like 7 through to 19? Like those tiny little cassettes, and it's a Jura Ace, which, wow, that thing flies, especially when you mix it with that lower weight as well. So, Jonathan Orr is really beginning to surge here. And I think Jonathan Orr has really learned what Igor's tactics are as a rolleur, as a fellow rolleur, as we get deeper into this race, and he seems to be able to know when to put in a bit of attack, maybe to counter Igor's tactics, and maybe lure Igor into perhaps punching that effort a little bit too high, perhaps cooking a little bit of that cardio. And Welter here, really getting in contention for that lead place position. But I know that Welter can really hold his place in the draft as well. So certainly Welter may bring a sting in the tail as we get deeper into this race. Kasper taking the apex of the road there, trying to push ahead, trying to deny others draft benefit and then drop back in seemingly. Or perhaps forcing a pace line so that he can force teams out of draft sharing tactics. But certainly another phenomenal attack from Casper. And Jonathan Orr is really beginning to surge ahead. Has Casper lured Jonathan into perhaps cooking his cardio effort a little bit? Perhaps punching and attacking when not ready? Sade as well, looking to perhaps regroup so that they can avoid that, cardio cooking, if you will. Wouter here. Don't let it go, Wouter. Keep punching on those crank arms. Igor, again, waiting for the right moment to do a little bit of a surge. Really coming into a spearhead of a breakaway here. And then as soon as I say that, regrouping into a lead out. So Lorenzo Simons out of Belgium. Also with, that is Moon Riders, if I'm not mistaken, the team that has Wouter in it. But is Lorenzo going to drop back a little bit, perhaps to give some draft benefit to Wouter, knowing that he's got the legs for a sprint, perhaps to bring in some draft benefit and pull Wouter forward? Again, this is where tunnel vision comes in and where maybe race tactics begin to fall apart, team tactics. And Moonrider's there, so we can see the photo of Lorenzo, really giving it some. Daniel Schosch from Deutschland, Francois Icar, Mike Wareham, Wouter Claus and Joe Rowe. And we have Wouter and Lorenzo up at the front here. Race 3R are currently beginning to work together again, getting back into finding where their pace is. But is Casper at a less than favourable place right now where he has to keep overexertion to hold back Race 3R? And we can see Jonathan on screen there with his photo, as well as Sade, who are right here at the front. And I believe that they're shoulder to shoulder again, perhaps beginning to do some marking, trying to deny that forward position to Igor and Anthony as well. But all that needs to happen is Casper has to be lured into surging for a little bit of a gap to come for Igor. I'm pretty sure Igor is pacing here. I can see the algorithm, the number crunching of that mentality of a UCI champion Fondo winner. He knows where to surge, he knows when to hold. And here we can see the E-Cycling Club Denmark, who have partnered with us for Chase the Yellow, and thank you for doing so. It's wonderful to have such a broad Danish contingent join us today and across the race series. So for Team 2, we have Jan Hansen, Brian Christensen, Jürgen Kolvig, Kjeld Hoch, René Zachman, and Henrik Larsen. My apologies if I pronounce any of that wrong. I'm just assuming that S's are pronounced like Z's, like they are in the German language. Igor Kopse, again, knowing when to hold and when to attack, going into this slight downhill, but has this opened up attacks for the flat? The trouble with flats, as I've discussed on previous races, is that they require constant effort and constant output. Is this where we may see fellow rollers come in for the attack? Casper Hederdam, your Jonathan Orrs of this world. And we've got a small chase group here, beginning to make up some pretty good speed. Getting in for the chase. And here we are back on the time slot 2 with Spratty's Koalas, who are currently forming all 5 of the top 5 places on the women's general classification on stage 1. Can they continue to do so as we get into finishing this race? Well, let's find out as we go further along. And while I've got some time to mention this, I should mention that maybe you didn't have time to register your team. Actually, I'm just going to interrupt this thought to say that we are now just passing the halfway point as denoted by the purple marker. So we can see that the Australia breakaway little cluster there is a little bit ahead still. A tiny bit at this point. It's maybe tens of meters in it against the Northern Hemisphere. I will now begin to unpause that thought that I was on previously. Maybe you didn't have time to register a team for Chase the Yellow, but maybe you'd still like to compete. Across the month of July, from the 4th right through to the 23rd, which is when the date of the actual Tour de France ending is, you can compete solo in Challenge Road. That is available to you on Wahoo RGT. And you can see the information on it here. It is an absolute blistering barnacle of a climb. So, in terms of elevation gain, if memory serves, it is just under 3 kilometers of a cumulative elevation gain. That's not climbing distance, that's elevation gain in a fairly short map. So we do expect that not everyone who starts this will finish it, but if you're in for a challenge, man, do you have one going. There will be a general GC, a general classification, or your results, if you will, that we'll bring to you, I believe, on the also on the 23rd. So it's coming neck and neck now between time slot 1, or Southern Hemisphere, if you will, and the live race in Northern Hemisphere. In terms of distance remaining, this has been very impressive from the Australia side. So James Ogilvie, the organizer of the Love Triple T series and the statistician, the guy who crunches the numbers of results for the Love Triple T or Love Team Time Trial series, is leading this chase group there on the left. And on the right, Mark Wardrop there leading this very small chase cluster as it begins to reform, going through our halfway demarcation. As well as having Lutz Pleiter, a familiar name to me, and a recent friend, a good friend too, out of Germany there. Good effort there, Lutz. Keep pushing ahead. You can pull that little chase group ahead, I'm sure. It looks like most everybody is getting through this purple marker now in Chase the Yellow. So with our team tactics, much as you can see, our webcams there with those glorious pain faces and Walter, who just never seems to be in pain somehow. You also have a baked-in race radio, which is a audio, verbal, if you will, communication method that is baked into Wahoo RGT, which may be what teams such as Race 3R, who are doing some great team tactics today, and Razia Racing may be using. You can customize it, regardless of whether you're actually on a Windows device, an Apple device, an Apple iOS device, or an Android device. You can customize it to be either global, which is the entire race, the entire world, if you will, or stage, or you can customize it to be just your team. Just a tip, because I have used it and it is wonderful. A tip if you're on a Windows device, especially Windows 11. So most other virtual cycling platforms are going to just have the option where you can select what your audio input is, your microphone, in the game. What I really like about Wahoo RGT is that it's more focused on your security and your privacy. So you actually have to go into the Windows 11 control panel, go to your app permissions, and actually outside of Wahoo RGT, you have to allow Wahoo RGT to have access to whatever your microphone source is. Because otherwise you'll be going into the game, into Wahoo RGT, and you'll be just tapping away at buttons fruitlessly, essentially. But I do like that as somebody who is maybe a little bit more old school and admires when tech companies put a little bit more into having control over where your data goes. And again, we're just closing in for all of those riders on that purple marker, getting through with all these small little chase clusters that are formed. Not quite pelotons, it seems, for certainly the Australia contingent to the right of the screen there. And to the left, I'm loving seeing the E-Cycling Club Denmark working together so much regardless of where their respective riders are respectively across the road today. But how is lead coming along on Northern Hemisphere? Let's take a look, because wowee, once again, that is a second by second contention for that lead spot. Oh wow. So a huge gap right now as we are going through this trough of the relative downhill, coming back into a little bit of an uphill into that final relative flat, a little bit of a climb there maybe. But Igor Kopse getting a lot of a lead there. But as I say that, Said Keradine is putting in a phenomenal push, I would presume in the real world, dropped it into the drops, pushed out of the saddle, and really just stamping through those crank arms. Igor now looking to deny draft benefit, knowing that he's closing in on less than halfway remaining. Looking to really make his prowess, his talents as a roller known. But it looks like our team for the contention against Igor Kopse, Race 3R, are starting to reform, maybe looking at getting some team tactics going. But Razio are beginning to reform too. Certainly in this main chase group here, which seems to be led at the moment by Walter Claus. I'm wondering if we're going to see Mr. Is it Plaga? Who's the other Moon Riders team member I'm seeing here? Oh no, it's Lorenzo. Of course it's Lorenzo. I'm wondering if we will see Lorenzo and Walter work together here to be able to pull up the road maybe a little bit faster. But Walter certainly pulling out and stretching out this chase peloton here, almost becoming a little bit of a little discombobulated pace line. And Jan Vanner there at the back, also with Race 3R pulling up. It looks like Race 3R are beginning to pull together there too in this main chase group. And Glasgow United Cycling Club, James Melville, Alistair McAlpine, Stevie Cooper and Ian Hepburn. And I believe James Melville is right up here for the cycling club. Lorenzo Simons. They get into, it looks like Mark, some of the Race 3R riders there. Lorenzo is pushing up this little group, looking to perhaps reconnect with Walter. Perhaps he can even hear my commentary, perhaps looking to get some of those team tactics come into the fore. Are they going to communicate through race radio? Communicate how to swap out who is their domestique for any given amount of time? So Jonathan Orr taking lead position right now. Interestingly moved over to the apex of the road, where we have a center chase group who may have the benefit here of getting draft benefit, but it does look like Jonathan's beginning to open up a bit of an impressive lead here as we begin to get into some very minor climbs. So Race 3R, I'm certain if they're on race radio together in Wahoo RGT right now, they're going to be roaring through that radio, cheering on for Jonathan. But Igor, he will wait for those attacks. And he is trying to deny, it appears, some draft benefit to Casper, making sure that Casper has to go full guns to be able to catch here. And I'm sure what Igor's going to do is he's not going to attack right now. He's going to drop in to get draft benefit and pace out an attack. Again, I can just imagine the number crunching going on there, the calculation. Jonathan Orr holding his own right now, but with that slingshot of efforts coming in behind him, that jostling of efforts, there is certainly going to be an attack on Jonathan's attack. So, Australia. We've got a nice even spread of teams here in this little chase group. Tobias Bjork, who is from West London, the union team of West London and Peddlers, really pushing quite strong there. I assume also couldn't make today's Northern Hemisphere time slot, so has joined the Australia time slot. But Stewie's Magpies and Bo Duke. I kept saying it, we were waiting to see when Bo Duke was really going to stamp on the cranks, if you will, really push this lead peloton ahead. But Mark Rowbottom really holding on for contention there. Cadell's Sharks, my apologies, are going to be very happy with Bo Duke's efforts here, and much the same as seeing Jonathan Orr for Race 3R ahead. I'm pretty sure when they raced, if they were on race radio, they were probably just cheering along the effort from Bo Duke. At this point, Jonathan Orr holding fairly steady at the front here, and you can see that the color-coded bar there for his exertion beneath his name tag, it's consistently staying around the amber, so he's very much found a spot where he can pace his cadence, which we can see by the animation of the cadence on his avatar, so long as in the real world he has some form of cadence meter, whether that's the baked-in cadence meter of a Direct Drive Smart Trainer or one of the battery-powered Bluetooth Ant Plus ones on a turbo. But we can see Jonathan holding around about that amber and the cadence staying very stable. This is perhaps arguably the biggest advertisement for pace training, and certainly, I know that's a wildly broad umbrella, but pace training when we're looking at cadence and pacing your legs. And within 10 meters of each other, neck and neck, as you can see if we look at the top center of the screen, between Northern Hemisphere and Australia. And again, that is the cumulative distance remaining, counting down. It is so incredibly close between both races. And we do cumulative GC between both races, of course, because this is all condensed as one race series, one stage. Casper here, really putting that surge in, putting the gears to Sade and to Jonathan from Race 3R. Now looking to bunch back up as a team, both Sade and Jonathan, looking to perhaps pin Igor. Certainly some marking going on here, but maybe Sade has lost a bit of that tempo. But we'll see what happens there. Can they pin him? Can they get him locked into that draft behind Casper? And is that enough to hold in somebody who is so deftly skilled at tactics as Igor? But Casper certainly will be making the E-Cycling Club of Denmark very proud right now. Certainly a very impressive impression to begin this race series with. The E-Cycling Club of Denmark have kindly partnered up with us for. So Andy Penn there Mark Wardrop, Sean Knight. And it looks like our chase efforts are beginning to string out, beginning to become individual. A little bit of chasse patate once again. Wayne, I couldn't agree with you more. I did some pace training today and that was enough for me. I had no intention of racing. I'm doing commentary anyway, as this is live. But wow, yep. I can't imagine the sting through the quads and the glutes right now. And thank you, Wayne, for joining us live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us live. We greatly appreciate this. I'm glad that you joined us here to help us celebrate that wonderful sporting event that we all love, that we all are full of anxiety for our favorite riders, and that is, of course, the Tour de France. So the bike place, we've got Tim Rice, Dan Baxter, Michael Rakeen, I think that's a silent V, Callum Henderson, Ryan Wilmer, and David Vass. I assume in Australia they haven't upgraded to colour cameras yet. That was a terrible joke. Delivered in a flat neutral tone, as any, I guess, British comedian would do. Spratty's Koalas. This is where we see Wendy Gallagher, otherwise known as Wendy Wonderwheels, who is in that top 5 there. Caroline Reuter as well, who took that top spot for the ladies GC or women's GC. Linda Van Dyke, Melissa Fanning, Michelle Williams, and of course Kat Coleman too. But Mark Rowbottom, it looks like he's taken the lead again on the RGT Australia, the Wahoo RGT Australia side of the race. Razio Racing are certainly making an incredible stamp on this race series so far. Jonathan Orr managing to hold Igor at bay, but the question comes in with somebody so deftly skilled at race tactics. Is Igor baiting us right now? Is he holding back? Time will tell as we get through these final several kilometers, and you can see the course here just to refresh what we're going through and what our elevation gain is as we get into the final furlong of today's race. Here we go. We're beginning to see Igor bring in a bit of an attack as we get into a little bit of a climb, but not enough to keep Race 3R at bay. So now it looks like what's trying to happen with the team tactics with Said Carradine and Jonathan Orr is they're trying to mark and spot Igor, perhaps communicating what they're respectively seeing to one another. Oh, look at that. Casper is getting into, I guess, what would be called the combative in the Tour de France, trying to push Igor into being pinned so that he can be pinned behind and closed into a little bit of a group here behind Jonathan. So the steering here in game, that is again a baked-in control. You need either a Elite Sturzo Smart, which I have, I don't often use it, or you need a smartphone, either Apple iOS or the Android. And you need to go ahead and download the Wahoo RGT Control app and attach that to your handlebars via a handlebar mount. Ideally turn it landscape, and then you can use your left and right buttons, which are touchscreen prompt in game there, to move left and right across the screen. I can't tell you how good the Elite Sturzo Smart is in game because I haven't actually used it. I do quite enjoy the proprietary app that they use with Wahoo RGT. And if you do decide to give it a try based on having seen the race today, have fun with it. I do enjoy Wahoo RGT. So Mark Rowbottom here, again, maybe a little bit of an Igor Kopse type here. I feel like he's pacing himself And I feel like B Duke, you can see there he's just hovering just a tiny scrape, maybe 5% above his functional threshold power. So I feel like I'm going to get very excited by seeing finish line sprints on the Australia side of the race today as well. So Casper here going into full anaerobic. And we are still neck and neck on that distance between the Northern Hemisphere side of the race and the Australia side. Igor falling back here with a little bit of a gap, but again, is this pacing? Time will tell. Oh, now I can begin to see a little bit of a pain face on Walter Claus. Wow, man, you've got some distance in those legs, I'll tell you that. And Gordon, yeah, I would be like Gordon right now. Wonderful effort, Gordon, and Carl as well. So going top left to bottom right, we have the UK represented, we have Sweden, and then we have Belgium. So that main front attack, that main breakaway on the Australia side of the race, it's almost like a pace line. There's none of this kind of marking and spotting tactics. It's a little bit more maybe camaraderie going on here, arguably. But we're certainly seeing the full aggression of the tactics of the Tour de France on that Northern Hemisphere side of the race. Bo Duke taking the front right now. And I should also mention, we just saw Walter Claus. He did win last night's race for the West London VR Race Series right here on Wahoo RGT. And once we're done here, once we're finished with today's race, if you wish to, you can watch the broadcast from yesterday of that. And that has commentary provided by the wonderful Dave Morrison, the founder and organizer of the West London team, both in the real world and in the virtual space. So Bo Duke taking that lead right now. But it is shoulder to shoulder, neck and neck. Jonathan Orr is flying here. So, are we beginning to see the efforts of the other riders begin to tire off a bit? Certainly we can see that Jonathan is pacing just sub-anaerobic there. Hopefully he'll have some cardio left in him to be able to get into those drops, push out of the saddle, really crank those legs through the crank arms. I know personally, I do not have the cardio effort to do more than a 300-meter sprint. But I know that if Igor Kopse hears that, he'll be like, oh, that's nothing. He could probably do several kilometers. So Said here, it looks like Race 3R is of course a little bit dissipated because Jonathan is taking the front. But Said here, looks like we're getting some aggressive, like proper TDF tactics between all three of the team contenders here, trying to push each other across the road, trying to give a little bit of the effort to deny draft as well. Igor's efforts by that color-coded bar a little bit all over the place right now. Are we seeing a rare moment where Igor might be a little bit tired? A little bit finding the peak of that effort? Or again, is he pacing and trying to find the correct cadence? It may be the latter for sure. And Casper here getting into that forward aerobic, trying to drag the effort along. Lorenzo Simons and Walter Claus here working together with that draft benefit. I think maybe a little far behind now as we're getting into the contention for top 3 spaces, but certainly the Moon Riders are making an incredible stamp on the top 10 nonetheless. And there's nothing to be ashamed of here. Certainly a great tactic when you know that there's too much of a distance to close up and still have some cardio left. is to hold and to know how to pace that effort to hold that placement. Jonathan Orr is still just flying. So what's he opened up here? Over 100 meters. So there is a chance that this is actually Jonathan's race today. However, we have seen the impossible happen in previous races that have gone up against Igor and Rolliers, very similar to Casper. Mark Rowbottom there. That does look a lot more friendly in the Australia side of the race there. Bo Duke, and maybe they've even spoken to each other, set aside team lines, and perhaps even looking to pace together to get those placements secured. Certainly it looks like they are doing a team trial effort. Certainly it looks like Mark Rowbottom is choosing when to break off the front and drop back. So that is entirely a possibility. It's not outside the realms of possibility. We even saw it in the real Tour de France on stage 1 with the Yates twins there. Set aside team differences right up until the final 100 meters of the sprint, which was incredible to see. Again, it was incredible for me to see Michael Woods hold into that top 5. No Holder there, getting into that sub-anaerobic. Everyone looks like they're kind of pacing here, and maybe they've come up with a pact of they're going to do a team time trial pace together until the final, let's say half a kilometer, whatever their chosen sprint distance is, and then that's when the allegiance goes out the window, when much like that old saying about the United States comes true, that united we stand, divided we fall. Or divided we sprint, should we say. And talking about the United States, we've got Jonathan Orr still just flying on the front there, managing to successfully hold that 100 meter distance. But Igor now, he's put aside his pacing and hiding of his effort and getting into the full anaerobic, and he is in the machine mode, in full chase mode. But there's also nothing wrong with pacing and getting that second place position. And then we have Casper and Sade here. Now this is where we're truly going to see the attacks, the sprints come out in the final few hundred meters, because everyone's looking to get the best position they can out of these top 4 or 5 here. And in 2 days' time, on the 8th, on Saturday, we have Alpe d'Huez, arguably one of the most famous names of any stage to come out of the Tour de France, and one of the most fierce climbing stages. So we are passing our Flamme Rouge, and I just learnt that the other day. Didn't know what the name was in French, but Flamme Rouge for our marker of the 1 kilometer distance remaining, or sub 1 kilometer once you passed it, I would assume, I guess. Well, not assume, I mean, that's obvious, but you get what I'm saying. Igor Kopse here, beginning to, it looks like temper his effort, perhaps looking to hold for second place at this point. And we are sub 1k in both now, and it looks like Northern Hemisphere has just pushed ahead by almost 200 meters in both of the Northern Hemisphere and Australia. And then Flamme Rouge is passed for both Casper and Sade. And we're past the Flamme Rouge as well on the Australia side, as you can see through the ever decreasing numbers in the top center of your screen. So watching Jonathan Orr fly here is very, very impressive. But as a cyclist myself, I don't race in the real world, but I do race in the virtual space. I mostly just train out in the real world. But what I mean to say is, knowing that, and the knowledge that comes with that, is I can't help but feel some anxiety watching it. Is it already claimed by Jonathan? Or are we going to see like a speeding missile, one of the other 2 or 3 contenders, just a shave behind, come in to take the attack, and nope, It is for definite now Jonathan's day. Didn't even have to put a sprint in, but certainly there's going to be a sprint between Casper and Sade, and I'm excited to see that. Now, this is where the allegiance goes out the window. Is this Boduke's day? And it looks like almost certainly yes, but very close there. And no holder there, just holding a stable cadence, maybe a little bit of a technical actually. It looks like his effort has dropped off a lot. Sade here putting in a big attack. Perhaps Casper cooked a bit of the cardio effort here. And Sade has taken that to also really push up the numbers for race 3R in the GC today. Anthony Debray, Jan Vanner, Lorenzo Simons, James Melville, Welter Claus all getting into their sprints here, all in the drops out of the saddles, really crunching through those crank arms. It looks like it's Lorenzo taking that 5th place position right now. And certainly now I'm watching Lorenzo as a sprinter going forward. Holding very strong. That's a long distance of a sprint, certainly longer than I would like to do. And holding steady and very stable in that anaerobic. I would have dropped by now into sub-anaerobic. And that's really what makes a sprinter. Look at that. Phenomenal stuff. Jan Vanner really closed a sizable gap there. Oh, look at this. Is Welter going to take it? Oh, that was Anthony Debray by a hair. James Melville just behind Welter. Keith Barkley and Mark Rowbottom. No, my apologies. That's not. I'm not quite seeing the name there. Rasmussen from Denmark. And another Danish sprinter here, putting in a good attack. Look at that, opened up a sizable gap on Keith. Keith is a very powerful roller, but much like myself, is not quite as powerful on sprints, and there's no shame in that. We all have different abilities on the bike. That's neck and neck there between Morgan and Kirk. I'm going to need to see those results to see who that actually was who claimed that. I think that may be a case of same time, but I believe Kirk was just a little bit ahead there. So Carl, who we saw on the webcam there for Sweden, crossing the line. And Welter just doing a spin out effort to kind of massage those quads and glutes and be in a good place to get off the bike and not get any cramps. Wonderful effort, Welter. And from everyone that we saw on the webcam there and everyone on the road today, whether you're on webcam or not, Daniel Schosch going in for a very powerful sprint. I believe just got that ahead of Kay Pedersen. And just passing the Flamme Rouge there is a little tiny, arguably spearhead of a chase group for the Australia side. Alistair McAlpine doing a sub-anaerobic sprint to that finish line. Great work, Alistair. Javen Bears. And I've forgotten the name of our Chilean rider here. And my apologies for that. So we saw a lot of stringing out on the breakaway on the Australia side. Seems as we're only getting through to 7th place right now. Daniel Cadiz is our Chilean rider. And ECKD continuing to roll over the finish line here. James Ogilvie, again, the founder, organizer, and statistician of Love Triple T or Love Team Time Trial. A great series that if you can get involved, you have to be part of a team, of course. Do, it's fun. And with Romania, is that the Romanian flag I'm seeing there? I believe it is. So Mark Wardrop there, got S-Knight, and we've got Bernard here, all crossing the finish line. Wonderful efforts from everybody today. Again, we will see a variety of fitness levels, a variety of expertise on the bike, whether that's roller, climber, sprinter. And we've seen that really come out in the wash, if you will, in today's race. And it's fantastic to, certainly for me as a commentator, be able to host this and really shine a light on that wonderful array, that wonderful range, if you will, of rider levels, and just show how fun it can be to take a part in the indoor virtual cycling space and to race therein. I hope everyone's having fun with us as well, getting to celebrate once we continue and go further throughout this Chase the Yellow series. So today we will not have the live GC for you. We will do what we did today. We will bring the cumulative GC, men's, women's and team to you at the start of race 3. So that's a wonderful way for us to lure you into coming back for stage 3. If you want to see what the tallies were, what the results were, come back and join us on Saturday. And where will we be taking on Saturday? Just as a reminder, we will be taking on the Alpe d'Huez. Again, arguably one of the most famous names of any stage, most famous stage, arguably, of any Tour de France stage, with, look at that, 1 and almost 1/4 kilometers of elevation gain. Certainly that's going to put some sting in some legs, and it's really going to separate climbers from sprinters. So join us then, same time, Saturday, July 8th, and I look forward to being there with you. Speaking of, it's been wonderful to bring this to you today. I've really enjoyed being your host. Join us on Saturday. My name's been Mark, and you've been a wonderful audience. Have a wonderful day.
gentlemen, perhaps we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't said to ourselves, just go, 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 go for it.